Well, let's jump into Leslyn Lewis, because you actually introduced me to her first like a while back. You're like, yo, might have the first black woman as a leader of the Conservative Party. And I'm just like, I didn't know exactly who she was. What was your first take when you saw Leslyn Lewis? Before you even saw her on the debate stage, because you talked to me way before the debate stage.
Yeah. So I got a tip off from a friend of mine. He's like, "Hey, have you heard of Leslyn Lewis?" I was like, "Who?" Right?
Yeah.
And he was just like, "Look, this is," was like, this woman is strong support. She's a lawyer. She's very bright. Da da da. And I was like, okay, cool. This is a really interesting candidate. And then I spoke to some people who were on her team, and their team was really ambitious, very bright. They were well connected as well. And then I just started getting her emails. I knew there was questions about the fundraising and just how big her actual fundraising base was to get over the line. And then I met her and we spoke, and I brought it up. I was like, it's one thing for us to throw support behind this, but I don't know if you're actually here for the long haul. I don't know if this is just like a publicity stunt for you to go and get a seat in the next election, or actually committed to leader. And she and her whole team were like, look, the money's not an issue. All we need is the signatures, and we need the ballots, and the ballots at the end of the day. And I was like, okay. And then she raised the funds, and it was game on. It was game on.
And on top of that too, she's a UFT grad.
Yeah.
Fellow UFT Blues, Varsity Blues, man.
Varsity Blues, baby. What's up?
Y'all rep. Did you guys ever talk about that or no?
But she and I, no, we didn't really bring it up. I mean, it just doesn't. It doesn't really matter, like in the context of where the race was. Like it's always nice to have like people from your own school doing well. But it was more interesting to me to see like a black conservative lawyer who is also a woman running for what has historically been one of the most white male dominated jobs in history. So I thought that was like the real story. Like U of T, yeah, that's nice, but
and on top of that, she's from the island.
Bro, like she has it as far as I'm concerned, like like it's a slam dunk, right?
Yeah,
like she's my people, right? And so there's always going to be that whole like what, it's somebody who looks like you, it's somebody who represents things that you represent. She's like a really strong conservative. She's bright, and she's somebody who you can genuinely get behind. One of her big problems though, she wasn't elected.
Yeah,
right, and the lack of experience really. Like, that was, like, my biggest concern. I was like, there's a lot of stuff that you don't understand about legislation, about procedure, about the process, about what a government can and cannot do and why. And I think that there were some points where it really showed, just like, even in the debates, right, where it's like, what are you going to do? And it's very difficult for somebody who's never been through that process to know what can and cannot be done. I think that she was lacking there, but, normally that would be a pretty big obstacle, right? But for her to actually have overcome that and do better than she was projected to do, in the end, everyone was talking, she's going to get less than 15%. Derek Sloan is, he's going to be taking a ton of her votes. And then, by third ballot, people were like, wow, yeah, right? Like she sank the McKinney campaign.
Exactly. And just one thing to mention also is just that the entrance fee was super high.
It was really high.
Yeah, it was $300,000, and she cleared it, and I was talking to Yvonne. I didn't know who she was, as most Canadians, I suppose, didn't, and it was just impressive how she did during the race. Well she did.
She had a really really good campaign team. Like their approach, their Twitter game was fire. Like her Twitter game was great. I didn't
see that.
Her Twitter game was great from even before, right? When she had first been put on my radar, I was following her on Twitter. I'm like, she's saying all of the things that somebody who's running for leader should say. She's supporting all of the right people. She's making right statements. Like her email game, her literature game, her Twitter games. It was hands down the best. Right? People loved reading her emails. They were nuanced. They were interesting, and it was something different than like usually like your traditional just like we can defeat da 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 da. If you just donate now, it was actually, hey, let me lay out some really nuanced points on my policy platform or where I stand on certain issues. And what was really interesting about her, she actually took very firm stances on social issues. Right. And she said, this is not going to hold me back. I'm not going to go cater to anybody. These are the things that I believe. This is why I believe them. And I don't hold just like traditional yay or nay views. I have reasons for why I believe the things that I believe. And I think for a lot of conservative voters who are on the fence about certain issues, it was nice to see somebody who's like, someone who's willing to think these issues through instead of just blindly following like, one big idea or just one personality, or I am the guy because of where I was before. So it was good to see, because when you don't have experience to rely on, like, your arguments really matter.
And the two things I wanted to touch on for her, especially, first thing was that, like, Leslyn Lewis, she was not destroyed, but she was number one in terms of the second ballot. Obviously, it won't count towards your overall points allocated, but the fact that she is number one in second ballot, what does that tell you?
I mean, it tells. There's a lot of things. One, that her stance on a lot of issues is more in line with the other two candidates.
Yeah.
In terms of like your average conservative voter, right? Like, of all of the candidates, she was probably the most in tune with the base, like the traditional conservative base. Someone like Peter MacKay, for example, really tried to expand the base. And there's this big conversation going around about what do we do about the base? Does the base need to expand? And if so, how do we do it by going over to the left and, like, taking socially progressive stances and trying to get, liberals on board for the conservatives? Or do you do it by making the case to be a conservative more compelling? Right? Or just opening people's perceptions on what conservatism is, because conservatism, we heard this a lot on in the election days. Like, we are no longer Harper conservatives, right? Conservatism in Canada is now firmly on a new wave and a new path. And she, in terms of finding what that identity is probably most in tune with it. And it's going to be very interesting to see how, our new leader, Aaron O'Toole, is going to be moving to position himself on that side. Because in the end of the campaign, like, he definitely was really just trying to take a lot of Lewis's voters, attacking things like she doesn't have a record and so on. And he doubled down there. But it's going to, I think it sends a pretty clear signal that the base does not necessarily need to be expanded by bringing in people on the left, but it's going to be, it should be expanded by making a more compelling argument, right? Nuancing your views and so on.